Happy New Year from Border Home Hints and Border Home Inspections. In today's video I want to talk about installing wood stoves and chimneys. I get a lot of calls this time of year, especially here in the cold north, where we get minus 30, minus 40 degree temperature on a regular basis. Wood stove heat is beautiful, it's nice, and I wouldn't call it free, but it seems like it's free. It's a lot of work, but people like to burn wood and the ambiance, the whole works. And I've done 400 to 500 wood stove installs, and on some recent jobs I've videoed the process that I use. Now you can use a different process if you want, but you got to come to the same conclusion. Here in Canada at least, you have to have certain standards, you have to meet certain standards, and the manufacturers set the specifications for how you have to install their systems, and each one's slightly different. Some jobs require different components and so on. So in today's video I'm going to show you the difference between installing in a brand new build. It was a cabin of a friend that I installed the chimney in there for him, and on the second job turned out it was a mobile home, but it doesn't matter, it could be any house, but it was a finished ceiling and finished roof with asphalt shingles. I have other videos online too that you might want to check out, installing a metal roof flashing on a metal roof, braces. I can't even think. I've got lots of videos, so make sure you check them out, and if they're helpful, then let me know. It's always good to know if these videos are helping people, and I know they are because some people are calling me and thanking me for doing that. And again, if you have questions about your wood stove installation here in Canada in particular, but anywhere, you can contact me, either text me or call me, email me, and if I get time I'll answer your questions, even if you're not one of my customers. I just want to see the jobs get done well. I want you to not learn the hard way, because sometimes I go to a job and I have to ask the customers to take the chimney back out again because they didn't put a piece on it that's required. So in today's videos, the compilation of the two videos put together, you're going to see what components are used and how I do it. I'm using the same chimney in both installs. It's Excel by ICC. It's my favorite style of chimney to install just because I'm familiar with it, and it's I would say it's manufactured. It's one of the top-end manufactured chimneys. Even Selkirk has a kind of a good, better, best system, and you know, some of their products are a little more difficult, a few more pieces to install, but I've done videos on those as well. So check them out. Like and subscribe, I appreciate it. And let's get started. I'll show you what I got. First step in installing a wood stove is to take the manual, or the stove itself if you have it on site, and determine what the sizes are and how you're going to put the stove in. So in this case we're going to put the stove over here in the corner, and looking at the manual here, or the particulars. So this is the stove that's being chosen, and I look at the sizes of the stove. So 23 5/8 of an inch wide, and then the stovepipe, it says it's 10 inches. I'm a little confused by that. When the stove arrives here in a few minutes, we're going to get a better look at this. But basically, make sure that you have the right dimensions of the stove. So then the next step that I do, and I didn't always do it this way, but I do it this way now, I put the stove, I know they want it in there on a 45 degree angle. So I've just used my little square, and I basically drew out the size of the stove with the center of the flue pipe on the top of the stove marked on that. And then I'm going to make sure that this says that the minimum, okay, let's find it on here. Okay, distance E right there is the distance the corner of the stove has to be from combustible materials. And then when you look up here in distance E for that particular stove, it's 5 inches. So what I have to make sure is that I don't just have 5 inches here, but I have at least 5.5, because the drywall is considered combustible. So we're going to move the stove out so it's at least 5.5. And then I'm going to put my laser level here. Not everybody's going to have a laser level, but I happen to have one. So we're going to line that up with the spot there. And then I'm going to look up there and see where that comes. Now I think that's going to be too close to that rafter, because we need to move it away so we get nothing combustible. So we get two options here. if the stove's going to sit right where it is. And I don't know if it is, I haven't measured it out yet. But let's say it's going to sit there. The stovepipe's going to have to come up and elbow out this way and then up into the box. So if we can avoid that by pulling the stove ahead an inch or two, that's what we'll do. But if it has to be 10 inches ahead, well, then we'll probably elbow the pipe, the black pipe. In this install, it's a little more difficult because you can't see where the rafters are. So that's the first step in installing a wood stove in a home that's finished. The previous video I did was the rafters were open and made it easy. So I've cut out the size of the stove and located the center of the black pipe connector. And I want my chimney to go straight up if possible. So what I've done is I've located the center where that stove is sitting. You can see my laser pointer. But what I've done now is I've tried to find the edge of that rafter. So I kept driving the screw in until I found the edge of the rafter. So that's my starting point. I'm going to build a 10 by 10 box, and I'm going to put my ceiling support in there. With the Excel chimney, the box just goes through the ceiling for a 6-inch chimney. Is 10 by 10. So I've located the edge of the truss, and I moved over about 5 1/4 inches. So I've moved my stove over to accommodate so we don't have to cut any rafters. Never cut a rafter. One of the nuanced things about the rules in putting a stove in a corner is that they want you to have the stove at 45 degrees. Because remember, all the dimensions that they're giving you on the chart for the minimum clearances is due to the fact that they've tested it in a lab and they said that it's safe. So what did they do? Where did they have the stove? They had it exactly at 45 degrees. So we tried to make it 45 degrees. Some people will put it in the corner on a 30-degree angle, and that's not like the way it was tested, so we can't go by those measurements. So we're going to make sure it's 45. And then the next step is to measure out here from the corner of the stove. I've got about 6.5, so from the drywall it's going to be 6 inches. That's going to give me an inch extra just in case something goes wrong. We'll see how that goes. Okay, so now that I've got 6.5 inches here to the corner, I've got 9 inches over here, so I have to take the stove, I have to slide it back this direction, straight parallel with this wall, in order to get that back to the 6.5 as well. So based on the dimensions I got from that piece of paper, this is where the stove's going to sit. And this piece of cardboard, I didn't cut it, but it's 2 inches wider than the stove. So measuring from that corner to that mark I have on the cardboard, 6.5 inches on both sides, it's 45 degrees. So that's where it's got to be. I've located the center of that 10 inches this way, or 7 3/8 inches this way, which is what that says the center of the pipe is, the black pipe. And then when I look up here, I can see where the dot is coming. And that's going to be too close to the rafters, so that's not going to work. So we might have to pull the stove out some more to make it work. I wouldn't start doing this process until I've actually had the actual stove to make some measurements, to make sure that what it says on that chart is the same as the actual stove, because you could mess things up pretty bad that way. If I had to do it because I didn't have the stove, then I would. But if you got the stove, which is going to be here in 30 minutes, then I'll use the stove, the actual measurements. So you can see my laser pointer is 3.5 inches from the bottom cord of the truss. And I measure up here as well. And why do we do that? Because sometimes the truss is not 100% straight. And you can see it's 1/4 inch closer there. And it makes a difference because later on we're going to need to know that we have 2 inches from the stainless pipe to the top cord and the bottom cord of the truss. Top cord in particular. On this install, we're going to put the stove kind of just this side of the door, close to the wall on the inside. So that's going to bring that chimney pipe up through the roof, closer to the eave than the top of the roof. So what that means to you as the installer or as the owner is that it has to be tall enough later on. So it's going to have to be longer chimney, and it's going to have to get braced. If the chimney come out of the roof closer to the peak, then you could have it as short as 3 feet out of the roof, essentially, but down below here it's probably going to have to be quite a bit longer. On this install, it's a cathedral ceiling, so the bottom cord of the truss is on an angle, the top cord's on a different angle, so it's probably like a 312 down here, a 412 up higher up. What's important with that is that if you're buying the ceiling support, that you should buy the square one. So that's what we have here. Excel chimney sells a square and a round one. If it was a flat ceiling, you could go with the round one if you wanted to. You could go with a round one here as well, except you're going to have to cut an ovalized hole because of the slope of the ceiling. So this is a much easier approach. What's important with this, and many people get this wrong, is you have to follow the book, make sure that you follow the directions, and I'll show you inside what the mistake is that people make. So you can see here in the book it says X minimum. What's that all about? So again, everything that you're looking at here, everything you're installing has been inspected and tested in a lab for safety. And that's how they give you these measurements. And what they're trying to tell us here is that depending on the slope of the roof, you have to drop this box down into the room a certain distance. So if it's a really steep roof, then you have to have it 12.5 inches down into the room. But if it's only a 0.12 to 212, you only need 3 inches. In this case, we're going to say that it's a 212 to 712, so it's 5.5 inches down. So the short side of the box has to be 5.5 inches below the ceiling. That's a mistake that a lot of people make. They'll put that box in there and they'll keep it too close. And why is it important? Because what happens is you measure from the black pipe right here up to the roof. And if this box is slid too far up, that distance from the black pipe to the combustible roof structure, it gets too close, less than 6 inches. So we have to have 5.5 inches right here on this install, but at other installs it have to be more or less. Okay, so again, this is Excel Chimney, and what they have here is a box that is 9 7/8. We'll call it 10 inches just to make it easy math. So it's 10 inches wide. So the center of that, for the center of the flue pipe down below, 5 inches. So we need to have a minimum of 5 inches for this box to be mounted up against a truss. But if you do that, then, well, that distance down there, if you look, you can see, hold the tape right, 2 inches. A better way to do that would be to turn it over. So that if you put this up against the truss on one side, you have your 2 inches. Well, you're pretty close. So what I'm going to try to do, because I only have 3¼ inches, I'm going to add 2 inches more to this so that I'm 5.5 inches away from the truss. So once again, where I have this piece of cardboard positioned, this is the very minimum, the closest I could possibly make this particular stove to the wall. So a lot of people will ask me about what's the best kind of stove to buy. And I have to tell them, well, it really depends. But if you have close clearances like 5 inches to the corners, then that's a pretty good stove. If it says it needs 2 feet from the wall to the corner, well, that's probably not a very good stove. So why I marked this right now is because my customer's not here yet. And when he comes, I'm going to show him this is the minimum, the closest we can go. But if we do that, we have to put an offset in the chimney. We have to come out this way and back up again. It's going to be more money and it's not going to look as good. So instead of doing that, I'm going to try to pull the stove to a position where we can go straight up off of here and miss the truss. And I'm sure that he'll be good with that, but I just want to make sure. So what I've done here now is I've moved this piece of cardboard. I tried to move it straight out this way on this 45-degree angle. So doing that makes this distance jump from the minimum required to 8 inches. And I did the same thing over there, so I measured 8 inches on both sides. Now I'm going to take my tape and I'm going to take a look at that laser level, which is still sitting right in the center where that flue pipe should be. And if I've got 5.5 inches or so, then I'm going to be good. So we're still 4 7/8, so we're too close still. I'd like to have that at least 5.5 inches for that 10-inch box. So now I've moved this, instead of 8 inches, I've got it at 9 inches on both sides. And we're going to remeasure up here and see if we have the 5.5 inches, which I think we will. Yeah, 5 3/4. So I can put a 3/4 inch piece of trim board here and here, mount that box. That's going to give me more than 2 inches from the edge of the pipe to here. Okay, so now that I know where the point is, I'm not sure you can see it in the video, but it's basically right about there. What I did was I measured 5 inches vertically, this direction, 5 inches that way and 5 inches that way. And I'm going to cut a couple of pieces of 2x6 in this case. You could have used 2x4. 22.5 inches long to fit in between. And that's going to be two sides of that box. Okay, so the first piece is in place here. We're going to take the level, make sure it's level in this direction. Double check it with the laser beam to make sure it's exactly 5 inches away. And then the one below is going to be 5 inches the other direction, giving us a total of 10 inches to put that box inside. Now, what's really important at this stage is that these pieces are perfectly level, because if they're not, that box will sit in there crooked, and then the chimney will come out of the roof crooked. Okay, so we've got the box built in here. If you notice, what I've done here is I've added this 3/4 inch piece here so that the box is pushed, the metal box is pushed 3/4 of an inch away from this wall. And I've done that because the upper cord, I don't want it too close. So then the next step is to bring the drill bit up through the roof so I can see where I've got to go from the roof. And you just got to make sure you get this drill bit level as possible. Okay, so up through there, drill a hole big enough that the laser pointer down there will go right up through, and I'll show you why we do that once we get up on the roof. That's good. Okay, so just like with the other install, the next step I do is I locate the center and I'll drill a hole. I want to see if there's any issues before I get too carried away in building them 10 by 10 box in this spot. For instance, electrical wires or something like that. So remember, when you're drilling through, to get the hole in the roof above, that you make sure that your drill is level. All right, unfortunately today is cold and there's snow on the roof. Tried to get this done sooner, but that's the way it is. So that's where it's going to come through. I'm going to brush this snow all off, try to make it safer. Put my ladder on the other side, tie off whatever I have to do to keep from sliding off the roof. So that's where it's going to come up through. I just wanted to double check that before I got too carried away. Sometimes, you know, that vent hood might have been in the way. So we want to make sure that you get it good before you start cutting holes in the ceiling. There's different ways to lay out the box in the ceiling, but when you have a sloped ceiling, you need to, it's not an exact square on the ceiling. So what I've done is I've laid out the corners of the 10-inch box on the cardboard on flat, projected it to the ceiling. So this particular roof system has blown-in insulation, so I'm going to cut this hole before I cut the bottom one out and put the box in, so I can push the insulation back out of the way for now. So that's why I'm doing it in the way I'm doing it. There's the screw. I've marked the opening in the flashing, and then we're going to cut it slightly larger than that, just so we know that we've got 2 inches of clearance everywhere. Remember, there's going to be a truss over here, and that's going to, you don't want to cut into that. Basically, you can cut over the edge of it. Okay, so I've got the box in, the hole's cut. I might make the hole a little larger. Remember, you got to make sure that the chimney is 2 inches away from this stuff. I think it'd be okay, but just in case, we'll cut a little larger. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that these shingles are covering the top half of the flashing, and these are underneath. So to do that, you tuck your cat's paw off underneath here, and there should be a nail right there. So just carefully find that nail, push that back down, get that nail out of there. You can see it's coming out. Reach in there, pull that out of there. So once I get 3 or 4 of those nails out, it doesn't take very many, I'll be able to slide that flashing right up into position there and drop the chimney in, and we'll tell if it's, so when it's level, you know that's the position that you want the flashing. Okay, so there's the chimney sitting in there without the flashing. I got the flashing in and it's ready to go in, but I wanted to make sure that I have 2 inches of clearance on all sides to the chimney when it's sitting in there in its level position. And if you look here, I only have about 1.5 inches. So I'm going to take my Sawzall and cut that out a little bit more. It's really critical. If there was ever a fire and they could prove that you didn't have proper clearances, then you wouldn't get insurance. Okay, so now I placed the box in the ceiling. And remember from earlier when I did a video talking about it has to be 5.5 inches down on this ceiling. I'm going to make it 7 because we're going to have drywall in here as well. So 7 will be lots. Next step will be to take the level and make this box level in both directions. Now I usually use a torpedo level, magnetic. I put one on each side. So we're perfect that way, but we're not this way. So that box has to move just a little bit. And that's important because the chimney sits on the base of this. The bottom of this is what makes the chimney straight up and down. Okay, so I have put the box in the ceiling, made sure it had the 7 inches here. Then I drew lines on it so I can put it back where it was. Drop this down and I'm drilling through this way. I'm going to put 8 screws in this. That's what the requirement is. If you buy Excel chimney, it comes with these little stainless steel screws. They're like super good drill bits, and they'll drill through this quite nicely, and I use them to mark the holes. And then probably from the roof, I'll go up and I'll reach down and I'll put the screws in here. I've made the box tight enough that it's holding once I get it level. I'll carefully do it, so it's good. So that's one of the rules, 8 screws in this box. Okay, so there's the 8 screws in place. This box is in, it's level. Make sure that when you're insulating, you don't allow any insulation to fall into this box. Okay, so I've got the storm collar on here. It's got to get caulked on the top. I like to put caulking down here as well. Sometimes I put a little in there. Clear silicone, and make sure there's a little bit of a space underneath the flashing. So right now you see how loose this chimney is. That's the normal procedure. But once you brace it, in this case it has to be braced. So talking about bracing, I like to brace it here because we're going to need another 2 feet on top here to make it high enough. I like to brace it on this piece of chimney so that that top piece of chimney can be removed when you're ready to clean. Otherwise, how are you going to get the chimney cleaning brush in there? Braces wrap around here. I'll put that on, take a picture of that in a minute. And then the braces go this way, roughly 90 degrees apart and roughly level. The brace kit for Excel comes in a little package like this. It's got the 2 bars, and then it's got a band that wraps around the chimney. I'll go into a little bit of detail about this. I like this system. It's very easy. It's partially installed or put together already. Some of the other companies, it's very awkward. There's like 17 pieces, and this is just much more convenient. So this is the band that goes around the chimney. If you look closely, you can see that there is a 6, 7, and 8. So it's a universal band that you could adjust it to 6, 7, or 8 inch diameter chimney. It comes pre-set up for 6 inch. That's probably the majority of their chimney systems are 6 inch. So we're going to wrap that around. This is where the 2 connections are going to be made for the bars, these bars over here. And again, I'll show you how that's done. This is the one modification I make on the braces. The brace is going to sit on the roof like this and up against the chimney on this side. What I do is I bend this top section about 30 degrees. I'll show you how that looks. And then I attach that end. I put a little bit of caulking underneath the joint, underneath there, and I put a couple of leg bolts through, and it squeezes the caulking out. And then we adjust the length of the bar to keep the chimney perfectly braced in a 90% level position. A couple of other tips here. So I got the brace kit partially installed here. Tighten that up as tight as you can, within reason. So I'll tighten it up here, put some screws on both sides to hold it from sliding up and down. The other thing I do, and it doesn't matter, but I like to put the seam at the back of the pipe so that you don't see it. Again, somebody coming across this lake might see that seam and criticize my work. Anyway, it's just about done for what I can do today. The braces will go on here. I got a 30-degree bend in the brace right here, so it kind of comes out on an angle, roughly level, and roughly 90 degrees apart. That's what I do. Some guys will put them right on straight back. You don't get any strength this way when you do that. So 90 degrees apart, fairly level.